what I've become very interested in, this is also something I very much want to talk with Rupert about tonight, is what happens when the process, when the evolutionary or developmental process awakens to itself, becomes aware of itself, as it must at least be to a certain degree for us even to be able to have this conversation tonight. The process is talking about itself, because we're all here to talk about it, or to listen to Rupert and I talk about it, or if we take questions, we'll all be talking about it. So the process is beginning to talk about itself. So then the question is, and this is what I'm very, very interested in, is what does it mean for the conscious human being who's passionately interested in the evolution of consciousness and culture to deliberately and intentionally choose to create new habits, and therefore, individually and collectively, for the very purpose of the evolution of our capacity for consciousness and self, and also so that we can very consciously and deliberately create this new intersubjective context of relatedness, which is what culture is all about.
What I work on is habits, new forms, new patterns, and the way they're organized in different levels, more and more inclusive. The fact that the universe is, and all nature, and we too, are so deeply habitual is good news and bad news. It's good news because it means we can change habits where fixed laws couldn't be changed. It's bad news because it means that we're all gripped by habits we've inherited from the past, and habits by their nature are unconscious, and we're subject to all sorts of unconscious habits. And so let me just say two things on habits. One is that we inherit habits of thought, and one of them we're all deeply steeped in is materialism. Materialism says that the mind is nothing but the brain, and we've all been brought up to believe that our minds are located in our brains, inside our heads. According to standard science and medicine, it's all just in your head. And this is taught in every medical school. It's the foundation of modern medicine and mechanistic science. But I don't think it is. And part of my own work on the nature of vision, just how you see things, is really looking at a way in which interiority, which Andrew rightly says is the key thing about consciousness, isn't necessarily limited to the interior of your body. When I see you now, what's going on? What's actually happening, I think, is lights coming from you, reflected from you, coming into my eyes, inverted images on the retinas, changes in the optic nerves and the brain. The standard view would say I then produce a tiny image of you somewhere inside my head and experience a kind of virtual reality display of this whole room inside my head, because all consciousness is in the brain. I don't think that's what's happening at all. I think what's happening is I'm projecting out an image of you, which is a projection of my mind outwards. My image of you is located where you actually are. It's not inside my brain, it's in my mind. But my mind's projected out in every act of perception. When I look at a star, my mind is literally projected out over astronomical distances. So it's interiority in the sense that it moves outwards from the center, my consciousness. But it's not interior in the sense that it's confined. It suddenly stops when it hits the inside of my skull and can't get any further. And once we realize this false view of consciousness, that it's all in the brain, a very eccentric provincial view that came into Europe in the 17th century, when we see that this is actually a very limited view. The idea all our images and thoughts are inside our brains, and no one's ever seen an image inside a brain. It's just an assumption. So this is a habit of thought we can break, and by breaking this habit of thought most of us have been brought up with, that our mind's inside our head, it changes our sense of our identity, who we are, and indeed our immediate experience, because our minds link us to the wider world in every act of perception. Our minds connect us with the environment beyond us. And to think otherwise is a habit of thought that goes against our most immediate experience. So I think there's all sorts of habits that one can positively adopt that can help re-establish that sense of connection.
Sometimes for human beings like us who have tended to live very much in our heads, in our minds, often we're so disconnected from nature, from our own physicality, that getting in touch with, for us, reconnected, especially for the postmodern, highly mentalized, self, to kind of, to just say, well, wait, just to expand our perception of what our experience already is, who we are. So, what's the relationship between the body and our capacity for consciousness? And then to begin to, then also beginning to just get in touch with consciousness itself, you know, which Rupert's talked so much about this, and through his work, it's also helped me to appreciate, you know, how profound the effect of materialism has been on all of us. So even for people like myself, you know, who believe we take for granted, you know, the fact that consciousness is the ground of all things, still, to me, it shocks me over and over again to see how materialism has affected the way I see the world, the way I see my own experience. I mean, it's become so automatic because that's the cultural worldview that I grew up within. And, on the plane over, I was reading some of Rupert's work, and if you really spend a little time with him, he helps you to break through this fundamental duality. And it's, you know, because he's very systematic and very repetitive. And I know in my own experience, it was helping me to see through this deeply ingrained materialism, to begin to see through, to see through a fundamental dichotomy and duality that doesn't really exist. So the interior of the interior of the material cosmos, is your capacity for interiority. There's an external and an internal. I don't know if Rupert would agree with this, maybe not, but nevertheless, the matter is the exterior, and consciousness of subjectivity is the interior. So when you begin to see your own capacity for interiority, especially as you begin to awaken spiritually beyond ego, that your own capacity for the direct cognition of consciousness itself as the leading edge of the interior of the cosmos itself, of the process, you begin to see how directly related, you know, how your own experience of interiority is directly related to the whole process itself. You see it as one thing in the most dramatic, thrilling way possible.